Welcome again, everyone. Thanks for joining us today at Crossroads Online as we wrap up our series called Grown Up Monsters. If this is your first week, let me catch you up. We are talking about the things that we don't outgrow from being kids and the things that become much more debilitating, much more destructive if we don't address them as adults. Our kid monsters might have hid under the bed or in the closet, but our grown-up monsters hide in our relationships, in our bank accounts, in our self-image. And so we've been talking about what are the things that many of us are challenged by as adults, and how does our faith interact and provide an opportunity for growth? We've talked about the monsters of being alone, of feeling loneliness. Last week we talked about worry and anxiety. Both of those have stirred up a lot of conversation and prayer, and seem to be a topic that people are really wrestling with. We think that's fantastic. And so today we're going to finish up, and we're going to look at the grown-up monster of shame. And I don't know what the first thought you have when it comes to shame. Maybe it's a person that, or an incident, or some sort of teaching that you were taught about shame. But my first thought when I thought I was going to talk about shame was this idea of when my dog, we don't have a dog right now, but we've had lots of dogs. When the dog had some sort of procedure or something at the vet, they would come back with that thing on their head called, right, the cone of shame, which then reminds me always of the movie Up. And the dog in the movie. You remember this? I do not, maybe you've seen this meme before. I do not like the cone of shame, he says. And I wanted to share maybe just a little bit of a light introduction because this is a heavy topic. The way that shame impacts our lives, the way that we continually deal with it, the way that it impacts our relationship with God and our faith journey is substantial. And so even if you just looked up a secular reference, if you just Googled, what are the effects of shame in our lives, in our culture, in our society, this is what you would see. That the impacts of shame are mental health decline, social division, reduced productivity and risk-taking, relationship dysfunctions, internalized stigma, and ineffective accountability. And that's just on the scientific level. That doesn't even involve our faith. That doesn't even bring to bear what does this have to do with our relationship with God. So as we take on this topic today, I want to discuss first, where did it come from? Where does shame come from? What are the origins of shame, not only globally, but individually? Where does my shame start? Where does your shame start? What does it cost us? And then how can we begin to have victory over it? So if we want to look at the question, where does shame come from? We have to go back to the point in history where there wasn't any. There was a place in time, and the scriptures record it, where there was no shame. In the second chapter of the book of Genesis, the first book of the Bible that talks about why are we here? How did God create us? We find that Adam and Eve, at the end of chapter 2, are together, and this is what we read about them. Adam and his wife were both naked, and they felt what? No shame. they felt no shame. And they weren't just physically naked. It encompassed all of their psychological, social, relational. They were completely transparent. They had nothing to hide. They felt no threat from any other person. And there was, most notably, no shame. Now, I guess the writer of Genesis could have decided to put other descriptions in there, right? There were other things that they weren't feeling, but right there at the beginning, we get a glimpse of how important this one indicator is that they had. If you had to list all of the things that they were experiencing, this is the one that they chose. They felt no shame. Now, if you have read the book of Genesis before, or even if you haven't, I'll tell you about it. All you have to do is turn the page and shame shows up. It doesn't take long after people are enjoying relationally uninhibited, unhindered, safe, joyous interaction before, turn the page, shame shows up. And it shows up in a temptation. It shows up, if you're familiar with Genesis chapter 3, in the serpent. And the serpent starts tempting Adam and Eve. And the different titles for the serpent throughout the rest of the Bible, sometimes he's called Satan, sometimes he's called the deceiver, because that's what he does here. He asks this question. He tempts and says, did God really say you couldn't, you shouldn't, you can't, did God really say, oh, come on. He's trying to withhold something from you, a deceiver. And then another title that the serpent is given later on is the accuser. And I want you to see, right there at the beginning of the Bible, there is a picture of how shame enters our world. This is not just a fable from some other time. This is an explanation of why my life feels the way it does. Because there is one who deceives and who says you can't trust God. And there is one who then accuses and says, how could you? How you call yourself what? Oh my word. Deceiver and accuser. And shame enters the picture. You might know God shows up later that same day and Adam and Eve hide from him. Then they blame each other. They end up blaming God. And there's the picture of our lives and where blame comes from. That we hide and we blame because we are ashamed. Now, there's been a lot written about the difference between guilt and shame, and they are different. Often, guilt is described as a feeling based on something bad that I've done, that I have a standard or somebody gives me a standard and it's clear I have not lived up to that standard. I either did something wrong or I didn't do something right, and that produces guilt. And often shame is reserved for the feeling not of doing something wrong, but of being something wrong. That it's the difference between I have done something that I wish nobody knew about to I am something that I hope nobody finds out about. The differentiation, however, is probably not as clean as we would like it to be. We experience guilt and shame often in a combination that is incredibly powerful in our lives. Eleanor Stump wrote a book called Walking in the Darkness, and she tried to, and I think in a really, really wise way, describe how our feelings of guilt and shame are both attached to our desire to be loved, that's what we saw in Genesis 2, right? That it was out of God's desire for us to experience love that shame and guilt entered the picture. Perhaps this chart will be a little bit helpful. It starts with talking about the two desires that love involves. Love involves these two desires. Number one, the will for good. That if you want to love someone, you want good things to happen to them, even if it's at your expense, you will good for them. The other desire that love involves is a desire for union. You don't just want them to experience something good. You want to experience it together. You want to share the experience with them. These two things are the desires that are involved in love. God created human beings to be loved and to be able to return love, to love and be loved. But turn the page, as we just did, and love is damaged by these two things. It's damaged by guilt when I have done something wrong or not done something right. That damages my love relationship, and also damaged by shame, but they function in different ways. If I feel guilty, the thing that I fear is punishment. I fear that you will need to punish me because I have done something wrong against you. Sometimes we punish ourselves, right? Because we feel guilty. On this side, though, my shame is afraid not of punishment, but of rejection, where it's not just that I have done something wrong, but that I am something wrong. I am unable to be someone that someone would connect with. So I fear rejection. And I would say these two things are happening simultaneously in us all the time. Ever since shame entered the picture, guilt and shame and hiding and blaming, right? So if I've done something wrong, I blame someone else. If I feel the fear of rejection, then I hide and I isolate myself. I hide and I blame because of my desire to be loved, to love and to be loved and to extend love. But then here's the good news, and we'll move on, that this is healed by, guilt is healed by forgiveness. That God pays the price for our guilt, and we are forgiven. But what Eleanor Stump points out, and this was a brand new idea for me and so incredibly helpful, that forgiveness does not heal shame. That acceptance is the thing that heals shame. And when I saw that or heard that, read that, I thought, oh my word, this explains so much about why the transformative nature of God's interaction with us falls short so often. Because we understand we are forgiven, and yet in our deepest of deeps, we still feel unacceptable. We feel like no one in my current state would want to be connected with me, certainly not a holy God. And the gospel says just the opposite of that, and is why it is so powerful. Here's a modern day author, Brene Brown, as she discusses the difference between guilt and shame. She writes, I believe that guilt is adaptive and helpful. It's holding something we've done or failed to do up against our values and feeling psychological discomfort. I define shame, she writes, as the intensely painful feeling or experience of believing that we are flawed and therefore unworthy of love and belonging. Something we've experienced, done, or failed to do makes us unworthy of connection. And so we don't. And so we don't connect. That's where shame comes from. It's where it came from at the beginning. It's where it comes from in my life. It's where it comes from in your life. Okay, well, where do we begin to see victory? It is by inviting Jesus into that place, the place of feeling unworthy of connecting, undesirable, ugly. I need to clean up my act first. And we don't have to look very far in the Gospels to see that this is played out, is demonstrated for us before Jesus even leaves the planet. After the death and resurrection of Jesus, before his ascension, we get this beautiful picture in John chapter 21. If you read the end of John 20, it feels like it's over. It feels like it's come to a conclusion. It says, and if all the other things that Jesus did were written down, all the books in the world couldn't hold them. And it feels like that was the ending. You ever see the Avengers movies? And sometimes they'll put a scene after all the credits, and you have to wait, you wait. And then all of a sudden there's this other scene. One I remember is they're sitting around eating chicken shawarma. I'm not sure why that was significant, but this is significant. And it feels a little bit like that. It feels like, okay, the story has come to a conclusion, but now there's one more thing. There's one more thing that you can't miss, is how Jesus steps into a life of shame and begins to bring healing. Don't you want to know that? Don't you want to see that? Yeah. Let's read it together. John chapter 21. I've given you a little bit of background here. After the death and resurrection of Jesus, Peter and John have seen the empty tomb. Jesus has appeared to the disciples, all except for Thomas, but then he appeared again to them. So this is the third time that Jesus is being seen after the resurrection. And after seeing Jesus twice, Peter decides he's going to go back and fish. And interesting, there's no mention of any fishing since the first time that Peter met Jesus. All the 3 years, he doesn't fish any. But after the resurrection, after seeing him twice, he says, I think I'm going to go back to fishing. This then is what happens. Verse 1. Afterward, Jesus appeared again to his disciples. This will be the third time, by the Sea of Galilee. It happened this way. John's writing this. Simon Peter, Thomas, also known as Didymus, Nathanael from Cana in Galilee, the sons of Zebedee, and 2 other disciples were together. I'm going out to fish, Simon Peter told them. And they said, we'll go with you. Not uncommon. Peter was the leader of the group. So they went out and got into a boat, but that night they caught nothing. This is a pattern with Jesus. The last time we saw Peter fishing, he had caught nothing, and then Jesus shows up. Early in the morning, after they caught nothing all night, Jesus stood on the shore, but the disciples did not realize that it was Jesus. This happens a lot after the resurrection for lots of different reasons. He called out to them, friends, don't you have any fish? I don't know why you had to say that. No, they answered. But what if they said, sure? Maybe the whole thing goes in a different direction. But they answered honestly, no, we're terrible at this. He said, throw your net on the right side of the boat and you'll find some. I think some things were probably starting to connect in their brains at this point. When they did, they were unable to haul the net in because of the large number of fish. Verse 7. Then the disciple whom Jesus loved, that would be John. That's the one writing it. That's the way he refers to himself. Actually, a pretty good way to refer to yourself. I'm the one that Jesus, I'm not the only one, but I'm the one that Jesus loved. Said to Peter, it's the Lord. Like, Peter might not have figured it out, so John had to help him out. When Peter heard him say, it's the Lord, he wrapped his outer garment around him, for he had taken it off, and he jumped in the water. The other disciples followed in the boat, towing the net full of fish, for they weren't far from the shore, about 100 yards. So Peter swims 100 yards. And when they landed, they saw a fire of burning coals there with a fish on it, some bread. Jesus said to them, bring some of the fish you've just caught. So Simon Peter climbed back into the boat, dragged the net ashore. It was full of large fish, 153. But even with so many, the net was not torn. Jesus said to them, come, have breakfast. None of the disciples dared ask him, who are you? They knew it was the Lord. Jesus came, took the bread, gave it to them, did the same with the fish. This was now the third time that Jesus appeared to his disciples after he was raised from the dead. This is God's word. And a few observations about how Jesus enters in a situation and begins the process of healing shame. It might not be obvious at first. A few observations. Well, number one, it's a good thing Peter gave up fishing because he's not very good at it, apparently. Every time we see him, he's been fishing all night and doesn't catch anything. But Jesus calls to them and tells them how to catch some fish. And all of a sudden, there's lights going off on Peter's dashboard. I've seen this movie before. I've had this experience with Jesus before. Has that happened to you? That you didn't learn the lesson completely the first time? And so it almost feels like you go through the same situation, the same emptiness, the same failure again, and you wonder how Jesus is going to react. And Jesus shows up and helps them catch more fish. I think I would get tired after a while of them continually trying the same thing and having me bail them out. But Jesus shows up, they catch a whole bunch of fish, and they recognize who he is, and Peter dives in after him. Now, I think this is curious because he didn't have to go back and go fishing. He chose to go back and do the thing that he used to do before he met Jesus. But then he sees Jesus again, and he jumps in and doesn't wait for the boat and swims towards Jesus. And then there's this meal around a fire. And if you know the story of Peter, right directly before Jesus was crucified, Peter, around a fire, denies even knowing Jesus. Somebody comes and asks him, aren't you with Jesus of Nazareth? And 3 times, just as Jesus had predicted, Peter says, no, you got the wrong guy. I don't know him at all. 3 different times. And so Peter's dove back in, is up on the shore, having some breakfast around a fire. It's just like the meal that they had with Jesus before his crucifixion. They're all gathered around. What's going through Peter's mind at this point? It doesn't tell us. But I can tell you because I know what goes through my mind when I have failed, when I have done and said and not done and not said the things that I know God desires of me. I feel shame. I feel, and I believe that Peter feels and hears this voice of shame. It's interesting. There's no dialogue in the first two meetings of Peter and Jesus post-resurrection, there's no discussion of his denials. So Peter's thinking, does he want me to bring it up? Does he not remember? This is strange, and it's weighing on him. And I think he hears the same voices that you and I hear. How could I? How could I do that? What's wrong with me? I'm such a coward. And I'm not sure what hurts more at this point, the fact that he did it or the fact that he swore he never would. Yeah, you remember that? Peter says, even if everyone else, Lord, deserts you, I never will. That's got to be ringing in his ears. And so, with all that going on, Jesus steps into this shameful situation, embarrassing, uncomfortable, probably for everyone, moment. And watch what he does. Verse 15. When they had finished eating, Jesus said to Simon Peter, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? Yes, Lord, you know that I love you. Jesus said, feed my lambs. Been great if that was it, but it wasn't. Verse 16 again, Jesus said, Simon, son of John, do you love me? He answered, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. Jesus said, take care of my sheep. The third time, he said to him, Simon, son of John, do you love me? Peter was hurt because Jesus asked him a third time, do you love me? He said, Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you. Jesus said, feed my sheep. Very truly, I tell you, when you were younger, you dressed yourself and went where you wanted. But when you are old, you will stretch out your hands, and someone else will dress and lead you where you do not want to go. Jesus said this to indicate the kind of death by which Peter would glorify God. And then he said to him, follow me. Do you love me? Do you love me? Do you love me? 3 times. And the affirmation, Lord, you know that I love you. Lord, you know that I love you. Lord, you know all things. Why do you keep asking me this? Who's the question for? Is it for Jesus' information or is it for Peter's heart? Yeah. And so 3 times Peter denies. 3 times Peter gets to affirm. And sometimes there's a lot of discussion about the words. Jesus uses a couple of different words here for do you love me? I don't think that's really the crux of the matter here. It's about that Jesus only asked one question. He just asked this question, do you love me? Remember the top of our chart? That love requires these 2 pieces, to will the good and to seek connection. And Jesus is saying, man, that's what I want. That's what I want from you. That's what I want for you. This is about the question that Jesus doesn't ask. What doesn't he ask? Well, anything else. How could you? Do you promise never to do this again? What's wrong with you? See, that's the voice of condemnation. Jesus never asks those questions. But you know who does? You and I. We ask those questions. And Jesus knows that we will ask those questions. And it is the tempter, the deceiver, did God really say, how could you? That puts those thoughts into our heads. And Jesus walks into that situation and says, look, here's the question you need to answer. Do you love me? Because I love you. And Jesus demonstrates his love for us, that we could make no mistake about it. Someone dies for you, they love you. And so, let me clarify. God's Spirit does convict us of sin. That's not what I'm saying. Conviction and condemnation are two completely different experiences. Let's make sure we get the differences correct. Conviction points to a specific action and says, that's not who you are. You're not acting like yourself. Condemnation points to that same action and says, that is who you are. You're no good. Conviction is prompted by God and says, let me show you what I can do. You were made for so much more. Condemnation is the accuser saying, look at what you've done. You should be ashamed. What Jesus provides Peter and provides you and me is the opportunity to move beyond shame. I love that one of the descriptions of what Jesus did by the Apostle Paul on the cross is, it says he scorned the shame. He said, shame, you got no business here anymore. Scorning its shame. Jesus offers healing and wholeness. Just one more observation. Jesus asks, do you love me? The first question, do you love me more than these? Why did he ask that? He asked that, I think, because Peter knows that he boisterously claimed, I love you more than all these other people. And Jesus is saying, no, you don't. No, and you don't need to. You're the same. You're the same as them. You're not worse than them. You're not better than them. You're loved, and so are they. And I think he's saying, look, Peter, you're going to need to know this because I want you to feed my sheep. And if you're going to be able to feed them, you're going to need to know that you're not better than them. You can't take care of my people if you think you're better than most of them. And now here we are. Jesus saying to you and me, in our shame-filled, sometimes hidden, sometimes makes an appearance when you would least like it to, voices, how could you? How can you call yourself? What do you? Jesus says, whoa. Do you love me? Do you love me? Then not only are you forgiven, you are accepted. We're going to work together. Feed my sheep. We're partners in this deal. That's the offer. That's the offer for the monster of shame in our lives. And as we draw to a close today, I'm going to pray that God would ask us that question and that our hearts would answer him today. Maybe for the first time. Maybe you answer this question all the time. Either way, let's answer God together right now. Father, thank you for the opportunity even to answer this question. Thank you that you saw our sin, our rebellion, and you didn't move in the other direction. You moved towards us, and you offer forgiveness, and not only that, you offer acceptance. God, help us to answer the question, do I love you? Do I receive your love? And do I respond and offer it back to you? God, that's my heart. That's our heart. Hear them now. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen.